the tech person has to be an excellent communicator to be able to pull it out and figure out what the actual problem is, not, band-aid a solution for them so that they have another problem. It's just temporary fixes here and there with technology. And then
Well, welcome back to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. Thanks for being here. Today, I have a special guest. He's a 5 times best-selling author, Atlas Altman. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Man, I love your show. I've listened to a couple of them. The 30-minute block that you put together, oh man, it's just amazing. So thanks for doing that, because I know we're all busy, and I was able to listen to about 6 of these shows before I got the opportunity to ask you if I could be on it. So thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're trying to keep it short and sweet, and keep people's interest. So keep it as short as we can. So tell me a little bit about your background. You've got a very interesting background in the military and in IT. So let's hear about that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, people always ask me, like, where are you from? And I always tell them America, because we move around every 2 years. And just like technology, we're always changing what was important, what worked, and where home was. We moved the ball a lot when I was a kid. Joined the Air Force right out of high school. Went in, no stripes, started with nothing. At the advice of my dad, who was a career Army guy. And I broke the Army mold going in the Air Force. Really made my mom mad. I'll tell you about that probably. We have a lot of time to talk about that, but I really made her mad. But I followed a lot of her advice. And one of the things that she always used to tell me was, like, you're going to become who you hang out with. So I chose to hang out with the Air Force for 27 and a half years. Just hung up the uniform recently. Throughout that, I found great success. Every organization that I was a part of won major awards. Graduated command 5 times, directed a lot of special operations and initiatives, was named a top 40 under 40 for technology and innovation. I just had some really great team members and really awesome leaders. And I took a bunch of notes, wrote a bunch of books, and that's kind of me in a nutshell. Now I'm on stages, and I spread a lot of different keynotes everywhere. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. So like you mentioned that you've led a lot of teams. So what do you think is a way to encourage your team so that they are actually a huge help to you rather than maybe perhaps a burden to you?
Oh yeah, that's I like the way you asked that question, because it starts with you. Like, you have to be able to be a leader for people to follow you. And so many people get into a position because they're good at their job and they have no idea how to motivate or, like, lead a team. They're just, hey, I'm going to tell you how to do this. No team wants you to tell them what to do, especially in technology. Like, why'd you hire me? I'm the expert, right? So why are you telling me how to be an expert, bro? Or sister? I mean, I got this. Can you just trust me to do it? So one of the things I did on the TED stage a couple weeks ago was I explained the team dynamic as not pigeonholing your players, like finding out what people really are passionate about. It's so important. And with technology, you have clues everywhere. People leave clues for you. Like, you have a guitar, I have a guitar in my background, you have a guitar in your background. Like, that's just part of us. And let's take a guitar, for example. Like, a guitar by itself is a body and a neck and strings, but you can't get any sound or do anything with it unless it's a team, and then you need a person to make it work. And so whenever you pick up the guitar, you're picking up your team, and you're hitting the strings and the body and the neck. It all has to work together in order to make a sound, and not always is that sound a pleasant one. The leader has to work on themselves with the team for that play to come out. And rock star, brother. I mean, rock stars come out of that exact team that I explained with a guitar. So it starts with you, man. It starts with the person in the mirror, and you knowing yourself and knowing what you're not good at, and then stepping out of the way and just empowering people to do their passion. So let me phrase it like this. People are passionate about things, but no one's going to tell you what their passions are unless you ask. And as a leader, it's on you to figure out what people's passions are so that you can place them in the right place in their team membership, can be very valuable to the overall outcome. And I got that from every team that I was on that won major awards or broke through barriers. Is just like, yeah, you hired me to do this, but then you realize I'm really good at this. And so you put me over there and we started moving faster. So it starts with you. You have to be worthy of being the leader. A lot of people are managers and they just want to task saturate everyone. There's a whole lot to unpack there. That's a
No, there is. I
great
mean,
question.
I agree with you. I teach my clients, and I do some business coaching with tech executives, and I teach them that it has to start with them. They need to know where their strengths and weaknesses are so they can build the right team. I think one of the things people always see, like there'll be a leader in charge of a department and then they leave. And then a
Yeah.
new leader comes in and they make changes, and people say, "Oh, I wonder why they're changing those people. Those people were doing just fine." Well, it's because it's not a good fit for their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I'm with you about the empowering the people. I think you said it really well. I'm the expert. Why did you hire me if you were going to tell me what to do? And it totally makes sense. I mean, if you're hiring a database administrator, let them administer the databases, right?
Yes. I mean, how many people do we need to explain that to? Yes. Because people figure out that they can do some of it doesn't make them an expert. They'll mess it
Well,
up, trust me.
it's like the military aspect. That's what's intriguing to me about your background. It's, you come, if you're going into battle, you have a plan where people have to be a certain place at a certain time.
Yeah.
And you're certainly not going to try to cover all the points yourself. You're going to depend upon the rest of your team to do their part. And if they're
Yeah.
not doing that, I mean, think about I mean, I love your guitar analogy, but another good analogy would be like in a football game. If the quarterback gets the ball and then the running, and not the running back, the receiver is supposed to be in a certain spot on the field, the quarterback throws the ball there. If the receiver didn't go there, it's not going to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So it's all about you have to, that quarterback is trusting that receiver to do what it's supposed to do. Well, same thing. The leader has to trust everybody on their team to
Right.
do the things that they were hired to do. And then it makes life easier on the person who's the leader. And I think too that a lot of companies, they rise people up through the ranks and they
Yeah.
put them into a position of leadership before they're ready.
Yeah.
And then instead of helping them, they kick them to the curb. And I think that's a big mistake too, because there's a reason you picked them to be the leader. And maybe
Yeah.
there's just some training they need. I have clients who are working 110 hours a week who hired me because they want to work 40, 50 hours a week, and
Yeah.
usually 90 times out of 100, it's going to be the team that's going to get them there. That's really
Yeah.
how it's going to happen. I mean, it's about 10% of the time they're just a horrible, horrible, horrible leader, and they need a lot of work. But the other 90% of the time, they're an okay leader. They just haven't done a good job with their team. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. So what influence? Well, I shouldn't say that. Let's not go there yet. When you were working as a tech person in the military,
Mhm.
what was that experience like for you?
I like to explain it in stress levels. Like there's different kinds of stress that we get, especially in tech. So I love tech. And the reason why I chose tech instead of going into special forces like my family, like initially, was because I got to be exposed to everything else. And then it brought me back into that world eventually because I don't know why. Just I guess we're drawn to that in my bloodline. But what I found was a different pocket of need, expectation, communication, and it's all weird where the tech person has to be an excellent communicator to be able to pull it out and figure out what the actual problem is, not, band-aid a solution for them so that they have another problem. It's just temporary fixes here and there with technology. And then especially with technology, people will come in, they don't care about technology until it isn't working. And then they care a lot because we've become very reliant on technology. But from the aspect of like all the things that a technologist is, it's everything, man. You have to fit into everyone's world. And that was just so appealing to me to open up different chapters of my life and then learn about, for me in my career, the different stress models. So early on my stress model, I changed the way the Air Force promotion system works. They still do it today, but they used to kick out numbers and then they would put the person's name next to the number. And I was like, that's stupid. If they're looking for their name, they're going to spend 2 hours trying to figure out if they got promoted. Why don't you just do it alphabetical and make the numbers go there? That's how they do promotion releases now. So that's like technology and a person. And I got to pair those together, and they're like, hey, you're pretty smart. Why don't you go work for the 4-star general, like the top guy? And I got to be a part of his decision cycle that introduced me to another stress of like, how do I make decisions faster? And it was all technology that I got to witness this guy unfold, right? So I was just kind of in heaven. And that was 30 years ago, and email was kind of new. So he was like, can you print out these emails for my decision? So I was printing out these emails and putting them in a binder and bringing them to him. One of the emails I printed out said that he would like to decide on someone like me to go to college, finish my degree, and become a full-time leader. And I was like, can I do this, boss? And my boss was like, hey, Altman, just put together your package. We'll find out. And then he selected me. And I got to go to college, which was another stress because technology was booming. Google was like something that was kind of used, but you know, it really blew up when I was in college because I used it a lot. And then I got into combat scenarios where I'm pairing technology with people on the ground, and I'm taking a patent model, right? The words ground truth. They come in from patent who would get updates from people, and they would be mad, and he'd be like, that can't be the truth. Get in the Jeep. We're going down to the battleground to get the truth, ground truth. And I got to do that from the air. We would fly over the battleground and we would talk to the guys on the ground, the troops in contact, the guys that were getting hit. Like, hey, what do you need? And they're like, we need these things. So I got to make technology move at a different pace there. That was a different stress. That was a special mission. And then I got to open up a tactical world of how we're going to fold into the next generation of warfighter. And then they made me work for an executive there. That put me into the White House, working for the Obama administration, where I got to be around him. I had to be around him. I lived at the White House for a couple of years, and I learned a different stress model there of like putting him on the phone. That's stressful. I can't, like, if the phone messes up, he's going to look at me. And like, I couldn't sleep. And that was a different stress. And then combat, Iraq, Afghanistan, having your life threatened, being shot at, mortar, whatever, like all of that's a different stress. And if it wasn't for technology in the world that we live in, where 8 out of the top 10 billionaires in the world are technologists, I mean, think about it. Like, leadership comes from technology now, and we get to be a part of that. So all of those things is how I look at it. It's a stress model for me, like different types of stress. How can I introduce myself to different kinds of stress? Yeah.
Well, it's
So
interesting. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how like a technologist, working for, some corporate company in America that's, putting out, maybe they're selling a product or something. They have different kind of stresses than somebody who is a technologist in the military,
yeah,
because if what you're doing fails, you're putting people's lives at risk.
yeah,
And that's something that's going to weigh on anybody's mind. I thought it was interesting about, Obama and putting him on the phone and that being a stressor, because you can see that, like, he has to take an important call and it doesn't work. Now what?
yeah.
Who's to
I mean,
blame? You.
the very first time I was going to put him on the phone, I looked down at the phone. It was an old military phone, and they were like, "These are the phones we have to use for the president." It was very regimented. Like, anyways, so I looked down at the phone, and it was broken. I was like, and my heart like fell down in my knees, and like I couldn't move. You ever feel like you're like, oh? And he's got this booming voice. He's President Obama. He's got this beautiful booming voice. So he's coming off a stage. He's like, all right, folks. And I hear him coming towards me as I see this device breaking. And I was like, holy crap. Good thing I planned for a backup. So like I took this giant device and I threw it behind the table, and I pulled out this regular phone and I put it down and I hit speed dial because I already had the number already programmed in case something happened like that. It's stressful, right? And I got the phone up to my ear as he walked in the room, and I hit mute. And like he had no idea that any of that had happened. I mean, I was
Yeah, that's what you
pretty
want.
glad that I used to hide close from my mom when she was coming down the hallway at that time. I think I had a lot of practice with like making sure everything looked good when I
Moving
first.
fast. So
Yeah.
you had mentioned You had mentioned that your family had a background in the Army,
Yeah.
but you went into the Air Force at your
Yeah.
father's suggestion. That I find interesting too.
Yeah.
And that your mom was upset about it. Why was your mom upset about it?
Oh, sure. And I talk about this on the TED stage. Um, the My mom always she used to tell me you become who you hang around, and so she always put me around army leaders. Like she really, unlike a lot of moms, she wanted to be on the battlefield of the future. Like she programmed all my whole life, like athletics, mindset, challenges. And then my friends were all like, "Hey, I can't wait till you become a Green Beret or a SEAL." And then I'm like, I'm gonna go in the Air Force. I'm be in technology. Like, you're gonna be a paper pusher, they did the old Simon Sinek and started with why, because that's what kids do. They all start with why, and a lot of leaders start with why, right? And that's why
Yeah.
leaders are confused. They're like, why are we doing this? Because the senior leaders or the board or someone who controls this company wants us to go in this direction. Why are you asking why? So I experienced that whole thing, and I was listening to my friends, and my dad was like, "Hey, I've been in the special operations community. Your grandpa's been in the special operations community. Every time we work with the Air Force special operations community, we're impressed. Like, and even if they aren't in the special operations community, just working with the Air Force, they value education and technology. And they're like, my dad was like, "Hey, you're an athlete, but you're an academic as well, and you would fit better in this job that they're offering you in technology in the Air Force." And I love my dad. My dad he always had my back, man. He came into my life at 5 years old, adopted me, and I have his name now, and he's just been the best guy ever. And he's never lied to me. And that was the best advice that I could have gotten whenever I was hard programmed to go in the Army. So my mom, if she was still here, I think she'd be proud, but she passed away a couple years ago. And I think if she were still around to see me retire, she would have been very proud that I got to do everything that she wanted me to do in the Air Force.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, different branch of the military, but still, the basics were there anyway.
Yeah,
That sounds like it sounds like you actually landed in the right place for,
I think so.
who you are.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so the guys that I work with, they're extremely smart. So we got some wicked problems. I mean, wicked problems. And I found wicked smart people, and then we would bring in industry leaders, industry CEOs. We would show them what we're doing, and then show them our mindset. Like I'm getting ready to write another couple books, but one of them is about goals, and I don't believe in goals. I believe in targets. So the difference between targets and goals is whenever I'd go to the range and I'd set up the target, if I missed the target, I'd just adjust a little bit. And then as soon as I hit the target, I would focus in on where I wanted to shoot on the target, but I'm hitting the target. You don't do that with goals. You put them out and then they become almost like New Year's resolutions. People miss them. And then what? They don't pick them back up. With a target, you're always visualizing on one thing. And then when at the range, we all had our own target, which speaks to teaming, right? So if you got your own firing lane and you shoot in someone else's lane, it's very evident that you're not in your lane. And so you can just put the target up. Everyone gets the same parameters. If you're good at a shotgun, dude, shoot the shotgun. Don't pick up my saw, my 9 mil, my rifle. Don't pick up anything. Just shoot your shotgun. And then everyone gets their own task, and then knock down targets. We put up new targets. They knock down targets. We put up new targets. And you can keep marching faster. And then guess what happens? You practice like you play, man. And then whenever the real thing happens, whenever whatever happens, a cyber attack, something fails, a SQL server dives down. A good guy, I'm gonna dust this off. Do you need the manual? He's like, "Nah, man, I got this." Get on the keyboard, he's good. You know, it's all relative, man. But where I found the most value is being operationally minded and talking about shooting, maneuvering, communicating with technology, so that people who aren't technologists or think it's scary or a different language would come in and talk to me, and then I'd talk to the expert about what they needed. So I found a lot of benefit in that. And I used to do the same thing. We'd do battlefield rotations. I'd go out and see the SEALs. I'd go out and see the Green Berets. I'd go out and see the Rangers. And I'd be like, what do you need? And they'd be like, well, this is weird. Wow. I can't believe you're actually here. You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you what I need. I need these things. And then we'd be like, okay. And I'd pull out my notebook and be like, all right, is that it? And they're like, well, can we get this? I'm like, I'm pretty sure we can do that, you know? And
Yeah, they're just happy to have someone listening to them.
right.
So I
They
want to
realize
delve
we're
into
not.
this target versus goal concept a little bit. So if, most leaders, they tell their team, okay, we're going to set these goals. You have until, whatever date to
Yeah.
accomplish your goal. Um, how would you handle that with a team, but using targets instead of goals?
Yeah, actually, I handle that differently. I use the 5 Ws. So everyone's familiar with who, what, where, when, why. And then if you're fancy, you add how to, you're like, oh,
Right.
I got 6 things. What I found for working with all these senior level leaders is they don't use those 6, they only use 3. And it looks like most people, whenever they get faced with a problem, they ask 3 questions. How much is it going to cost for this problem to be fixed? When can it be solved so it goes away? And then who's going to do it? And the problem isn't the questions they get asked, it's the order. And when you ask them in that order, you say, how much is it going to cost? It goes to the finance people, the accountants, and they come up with crunching numbers. And they're like, here's the number.
Right.
And then you bring the how long is it going to take to the operation cell, the production cell, the salespeople, and they're like, if we start now, because they always say that we're going to start right now, and then it'll take 2 months or whatever. So they bring those 2 figures to someone like you or your executives or someone like me, and they would bring it to me, and I'd be like, guys, this is a terrible idea. When do I start? Because like I'm never going to say no to a challenge. But when you're asking all those questions, a lot of times a leader gets fired or they miss the deadline and they come in way over budget because the order is wrong. And what I found in special operations and all the elite teams, this highly selective organizations that I got to be a part of, they looked at the person that they were bringing into the organization really heavily. And they were like, what are you capable of? Even if you're not a good leader, we can teach you how to be. If you don't know this technology, we'll find somebody to pair you with so they can explain it to you while it's going on. And all of the things focus around people, not money and not time. So whenever you focus on the right person first, that's how it works. That's how I explain that model. It's a 3-part model. It's rule
Makes sense.
3. I wrote a couple blogs about it. I wrote kind of my book is kind of like that. It talks about if you give people more than 3 things, they dump it because it's too much. If you give them more than 3 tasks in a day, it's just going to overload them. They're like, I don't know if I can do all that. If you give them
Yeah,
one thing, done.
yeah. Well, I used to have a mentor, and it stuck with me to this day. I mean, gosh, it's been almost 40 years. Um, and he used to say, first things first, second
Yeah.
things never. And to this day, when I tell people that, they say, huh? I don't understand. Well, he's literally just saying, always stay focused on the number one thing that you have to get done. And don't move on to number two until number one is done. But then when number one is done, number two becomes number one. So now you go back to focusing on the number one thing again. And you just always keep your focus on that number one thing, and you'll hit your targets and get
Yep.
to where you need to go. But if you start jumping around, and especially because a lot of times your list, so to speak, is set up in a way that you got to do this in order to accomplish this other thing,
Yeah.
which depends on this thing now, which then depends on this thing. And if you jump around, you're just not going to get anything done. So
So true.
always focusing on that first things first. I mean, the only way I've ever modified it is I actually manage my time in a context-based manner now, because for a while I had to travel a lot, and there's just things. If my number one priority was fixing the roof on my house and I had to travel to Chicago, I
Yeah.
couldn't do that.
No.
So you have to then be able to pivot to what can I do while I'm here in Chicago, that kind of thing. So I have a question for you though. I was thinking about this as you were talking. So in a military situation, well, okay, in a corporate situation, if I'm looking to fill a position in my IT team, I do the typical thing, put out an advertisement, bring the person in, interview, pick the best person that I find out of those interview process. How does that work in the military, since people are, they're enlisted or, drafted in?
Yeah. Well, no one's drafted anywhere. Well, I mean, there's
Well,
still a
yet.
possibility of drafting, but no one's drafted. But yeah, they're all volunteer force right now. Thank God. So in the military, it depends on the organization. When I got assessed with the White House, they brought me out for 3 days. They checked my background. They wanted to see if I could get my clearance because I had a clearance that was equivalent to what the president could know, and that for us is a year-long process if we're expediting it. So they start in there. They check me and how I handle money, and I think at that time I was handling a couple $1 billion for the organization that I was working for. So that wasn't hard to do on the organizational side, but personally, they wanted to make sure I wasn't like crazy in debt or anything like that.
Right.
And then like how uh, how could another country potentially manipulate me, or is there anything in my background, any skeletons in my closet that would come out that would defame the White House and the office of the president, because we work for the office of the president, and it didn't matter who it was. So as the chief executive, and the head of the military, the president's office couldn't be something that I brought down. They had to make sure all of that was clear. And then they brought me in and asked me a series of questions, very much like the civilian interview process that goes on. Like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? That's a big thing you should know, man. But whenever I talk to executives and I do a SWOT analysis, strengths, opportunities, and threats and weaknesses. I don't believe in threats, by the way. I took the threats out. I think everything's an opportunity. It's like no press is bad press. I think everything is just what it is, and it could be an opportunity if you look at it the right way. So when people pair that together, the two things you should be looking at are what are you good at and what are you not good at. If you can nail those things down, then you can pretty much nail any interview.
I like the
So
way you think. I like the way you think because to me, when you do a SWOT analysis, the whole purpose of identifying the threat is to turn it into an opportunity.
mm,
So why not jump right there, right? Like I know I have
yes,
this threat, but instead of calling it a threat, let me turn it into an opportunity and phrase it a different way and maybe approach it a different way. I like that.
yeah. Well, it's all the mindset, anyways, man. Like,
Well, yeah,
there's a
mindset's everything. I mean, um, without the right mindset, you can't accomplish,
yeah,
the half of what you need to accomplish. So you wrote a book called Rule of Three,
yeah,
and we kind of slightly touched on it, but tell me a little more about that.
yeah. Yeah, it became an international bestseller in UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States. So, pretty excited about that. And launch with what's coming back that people like about it is you can read the whole book in 5 minutes, man. I made a summary on the back end of each chapter, so you can just flip to it and be like, lessons learned and best practices. Next chapter, lessons learned and best practices. If you want to read the story of like how I got accused of stealing a Secret Service vehicle, that story is all in there if you want the entertainment value. But just the meat and potatoes, like why people should read books like that, you can read it in 5 minutes. So that took me a lot of time. It took me about 3 years, but it's a combination of all of my military careers. Anything that I saw as being awesome, I took out my notebook and I wrote it down, and I started pairing that with a theme. And if it was repeated 10, 15, 20 times, I made it part of my book. So I condensed, almost 3 decades of military experience into a book you can pick up and take home, or you can read for I think it's at 99 cents right now, dude. I'll keep it at that price because I just don't, I want people to take advantage of all the things that I learned, and then that makes us all stronger, especially in technology, man. Our community, if we can just come together and talk about things, we can move so much faster. And the next iteration is AI, and AI. They recorded, my book launched. AI did a book summary on it. It was really good, and it takes you 30 minutes to read the AI summary. I'm like, wow, I am I not reading books with AI? This is fantastic. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you, AI.
Proved your point. But that's funny that you mentioned that because that leads me to a question I like to ask of late anyway, every guest that comes on here, and that is, what are your thoughts on AI and the future of AI and its positives and negatives?
I love AI. We've been working with it in the community for a very long time. I use AI for personal assistant work. So my fiance and I were in Vegas. We picked up a show, and we were staying on the south end of over by the airport, and the pinball machine, and I was
Mhm.
looking at Uber versus parking at the Cosmo, and I was like, why am I not asking my personal assistant? So I pulled out what I use is chatbot, but there's a lot of different. But chatbot was the one that I have, and I said, hey, where should I park if I'm going to a concert? And it spit out an answer. You should park on the second floor. There's probably somebody there waiting to take $10 that'll park your car. And I'm like, all right, well, if I'm looking at Uber and Lyft and $10, and I get my car right after the show, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. And it was true. There was a dude on the second floor, and he was like waving me. I'm like, hey man, if I give you $10, will you park my car? He's like, absolutely. I'm like, dang. That's one instance, two instances that I've given you that have been absolutely phenomenal, just impressive to me. A lot of the friends that I have that work in the community, they're saying, hey, it's coming real fast, but there's still a lot of old knowledge in there, 4 to 6 years, depending on what kind of output you get from AI, right? So you have to still look at it with that human eye, man, and you'll never ever avoid that human eye. And if you do, you're setting yourself up for failure if you just trust what it gives you, then that's problematic, because AI doesn't have the same morals, the same ethics, the same principles that you have been brought up with. And you have to put that in there sometimes because it's not a human. It gives you an answer, and then it's up to you to make that answer correct. So that's my spin on AI right now.
Yeah, and one of the things I've been teaching my younger kids, they're both in, one just graduated college and others in second year, and I tell them, like, don't just rely on Google. Use some of the AI tools to ask the same questions,
Yeah.
because like people are finding nowadays that they can plan an entire vacation using AI, because AI will tell them the places that are interesting to go look at, or things like you got,
Yeah.
parking tips. I can tell you, as a person who lives in Vegas, um, my wife and I went to a festival concert about 2 weeks ago, and right now it's a disaster on the strip because of Formula
Okay.
One.
Yep.
And so we looked to do first we looked at Lyft, and they wanted $330 to take me to a place that would normally cost about 12.
What?
Um,
Because it's going to
and
take you
then
two
and
hours to
then
get there.
yeah, and then we decided on Uber, and in round trip it cost us $60, and to park the car, not including wear and tear and gas, was 75. So it was clearly the better option. But like it even told us things like, make sure when you're done you walk to the Strat, don't go to these other hotels, because that's where the concert venue told people to go. So it was
Wow.
really smart, and as we were walking we noticed it too, like you said, you pull in and there's a guy waiting there exactly like your tool told you. We're walking, and all of a sudden everyone's turning off and crossing the street to the Sahara, and we
Mm.
just kept on walking with like maybe three other people. So the wait time for our lift
Oh
was
my
so
gosh.
much shorter at the
Oh my
Strat
gosh.
than it would have been at the Sahara. And like we were even saying, well, this is good too, because if we decide we want to call a cab instead, you can easily do that because there's not a lot of people here. So it was an interesting experience using AI to determine what's the best way to get to and from the concert. So really interesting. Well, this has been an interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all those things under Atlas, Atlas Altman, Altman. My website's Leaders Tac Kit, so that's Leaders Dash Kit if you're not in the military. Leaders, and then the little line and KIT. All my books are available everywhere books are sold. But you can reach out to me on any one of the platforms. I am the person that does the messaging. If you hit me with a direct message, I'll get back to you. I have a couple there's bureau who are interested in having me that I like to work through. So you hit me on a DM, I will push you to one of them, and they can get you uh, the information to get me on a stage or a show like this.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I've really appreciated you taking the time here today. It's been informative. This is interesting to me because never have I had somebody who did technology within the military. And at first glance, doesn't seem like it would be extremely different, but then there are things about it that are different. So, I mean, I liked how I like your stress levels. I think more people need to think in terms of that because
Mm.
like I know when I assign tasks to my team, if they don't understand the essentially the stress level of that task, they might sit on it for a while, and I'm like, hey, I want this done yesterday, what's going on? So anyway, it's been a pleasure to meet you and learn about your background, and thanks again so much for being on the show.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks again for having me.
All right, thanks everyone for listening to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We'll be back again next week with another interesting technology conversation.